March 13th, 1962. Lyman Lemnitzer, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, presents a proposal to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, named Operation Northwoods. The document proposed staging terrorist attacks in and around Guantanamo Bay to provide a pretext for military intervention in Cuba. The plans included starting rumors about Cuba using clandestine radio, landing friendly Cubans inside the base to stage attacks, starting riots at the main gate, blowing up ammunition inside the base, starting fires, sabotaging aircraft and ships on the base, bombing the base with mortar shells, sinking a ship outside the entrance, staging funerals for mock victims, staging a terror campaign in Miami, Florida and Washington, D.C., and finally, destroying a drone aircraft over Cuban waters. The passengers, federal agents in reality, would allegedly be college students on vacation. A plane at Eglin Air Force Base would be painted and numbered as a duplicate of a registered civil aircraft belonging to a CIA front in Miami. The duplicate would be substituted for the real plane and loaded with the passengers. The real plane would be converted into a drone. The two planes would rendezvous south of Florida. The passenger-laden plane would land at Eglin Air Force Base to evacuate its passengers and return to its original status. The drone would pick up the scheduled flight plan and, over Cuban waters, transmit a Mayday signal before being blown up by remote control. The plan is rejected by McNamara, and President John F. Kennedy personally removes Lemnitzer as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. December 1st, 1984. A remote-controlled Boeing 720 takes off from Edwards Air Force Base and is crash-landed by NASA for fuel research. Before its destruction, the plane flew a total of 16 hours and 22 minutes, including 10 takeoffs, 69 approaches, and 13 landings. August 1997. The cover of FEMA's Emergency Response to Terrorism depicts the World Trade Center in crosshairs. February 28th, 1998. The Global Hawk, Raytheon's unmanned aircraft vehicle, completes its first flight over Edwards Air Force Base in California, at an altitude of 32,000 feet, cruising altitude for a commercial jetliner. 1999. NORAD begins conducting exercises in which hijacked airliners are flown into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. June 2000. The Department of Justice releases a terrorism manual with the World Trade Center in crosshairs. September 2000. The Project for a New American Century, a neoconservative think tank whose members include Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Jeb Bush, and Paul Wolfowitz, releases their report entitled Rebuilding America's Defenses. In it, they declare that the process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor. October 24th, 2000. The Pentagon conducts the first of two training exercises called mas.Cada, which simulate a Boeing 757 crashing into the building. Charles Burlingame, an ex-Navy F-4 pilot who worked in the Pentagon, participates in this exercise before retiring to take a job at American Airlines, where, less than a year later, his Boeing 757 allegedly crashes into the building. April 2001. NORAD plans an exercise in which a plane is flown into the Pentagon, but is rejected as too unrealistic. June 2001. The Department of Defense initiates new instructions for military intervention in the case of a hijacking. It states that for all non-immediate responses, the Department of Defense must get permission directly from the Secretary of Defense. Attorney General John Ashcroft begins flying on chartered jets for the remainder of his term due to a threat assessment by the FBI. July 4th, 2001. Osama bin Laden, wanted by the United States since 1998, receives medical attention at the American hospital in Dubai, where he is visited by a local chief of the CIA. July 24th, 2001. Larry A. Silverstein, who already owned World Trade Center 7, signs a $3.2 billion 99-year lease on the entire World Trade Center complex 6 weeks before 9/11. Included in the lease is a $3.5 billion insurance policy, specifically covering acts of terrorism. September 6, 2001. 3,150 put options are placed on United Airlines stock. A put option is a bet that a stock will fall. That day, put options were more than 4 times its daily average. Bomb-sniffing dogs are pulled from the World Trade Center, and security guards end 2 weeks of 12-hour shifts. September 7th, 2001. 27,294 put options are placed on Boeing's stock, more than 5 times the daily average. September 10th, 2001. 4,516 put options are placed on American Airlines, almost 11 times its daily average. Newsweek reports that a number of top Pentagon brass canceled their flight plans for the next morning. San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown receives a phone call warning him not to fly the next morning. Pacifica Radio later reveals that this phone call came directly from National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice. And in Pakistan, at a military hospital, all of the urologists are replaced by a special team in order to host their guest of honor, Osama bin Laden, who is carefully escorted inside to be watched carefully and looked after. September 11th, 2001. The National Reconnaissance Office in Chantilly, Virginia is preparing for an exercise in which a small corporate jet crashes into their building. NORAD is in the middle of a number of military exercises. The first, Vigilant Guardian, is described as an exercise that would pose an imaginary crisis to North American air defense outposts nationwide. The second, Northern Vigilance, moved fighter jets to Canada and Alaska to fight off an imaginary Russian fleet. 3 F-16s from Washington, D.C.'s National Guard at Andrews Air Force Base, 15 miles from the Pentagon, are flown 180 nautical miles away for a training mission in North Carolina. This left 14 fighter jets to protect the entire United States.
Hi, Boston Center, Team U. We have a problem here. We have a hijacked aircraft headed towards New York, and we need you guys we need someone to scramble some F-16s or something up there to help us out.
Is this real world or exercise?
No, this is not exercise, not a test. Do we want to think about scrambling aircraft? Oh, God, I don't know. That's a decision somebody's going to have to make probably in the next 10 minutes. Everybody just left the room.
Ese martes 11 de septiembre, el presidente Bush realizaba una visita a una escuela primaria de Florida. Después del ataque a la Torre Sur, a las 9:05, Andrew Card, su jefe de personal, le comunica el siguiente mensaje. Un segundo avión atacó la segunda torre. América está bajo ataque. El protocolo del servicio secreto es muy claro. En caso de ataque, deben tomar al presidente y llevarlo inmediatamente a un lugar seguro, no divulgado. El solo dar un mensaje al oído es inconcebible en una verdadera crisis. Después de recibir este mensaje, ¿qué hace el comandante en jefe de los Estados Unidos? Nada. Se queda por más de 5 minutos escuchando leer a los niños de la primaria Emma Booker. Más tarde, el presidente Bush explica que quería transmitir una imagen de calma. La imagen que transmite no es precisamente de calma. Cuando Bush sale hacia el aeropuerto, el servicio secreto equivoca el camino y tiene que dar una vergonzosa vuelta en U. ¿Puede ser que el servicio secreto haya olvidado dónde dejaron el avión presidencial? Los teléfonos del automóvil presidencial, a pesar de ser de lo más avanzado en tecnología de comunicaciones, no funcionan. Bush tiene que conformarse con usar un celular prestado, pero no puede comunicarse a Washington, pues las líneas seguras tampoco funcionan. Una vez en el avión presidencial, se dan cuenta de que los sofisticados sistemas de comunicación del Air Force One también están fuera de servicio. Karen Hughes, consejera del presidente, trata de contactarlo desde la Casa Blanca.
And the operator came back, and I remember his voice was kind of shaky, and he said, "Ma'am, we cannot reach Air Force One." And that was a very, very frightening moment, because of course I'd never had that happen before.
¿De verdad todo esto es creíble? Una vez conocida la emergencia, muchas bases militares ofrecieron inmediatamente su ayuda. Esta mafia debe haber considerado el caso de que alguna de estas bases actuara por iniciativa propia y tratara de impedir los ataques. El único que puede dar la orden para derribar un avión secuestrado es el presidente. Al mantenerlo lejos e incomunicado, aseguraban de que si por casualidad algún avión caza interceptaba a los aviones de ataque, sin la orden presidencial tendría las manos atadas y no podría hacer nada.
September 11th, we learned that 4 passenger planes were hijacked and taken radically off course. Within an hour, 2 of the planes have flown into the enormous steel towers of the World Trade Center, creating fires and eventually toppling them. Dazed by the news, the American public soon believed the fires in the towers had burned so hot they caused the steel frames of the buildings to give way. A myth developed, fed by official sources through the media to a bewildered audience. Elements of the myth: the impact of the airplanes, gallons of burning jet fuel, steel melting, the buildings failing and suddenly imploding. In a mere 10 seconds, 110 stories hurtled earthward, pulverizing into dust. Right from the start, on the street itself, the official story was born.
Come out of nowhere and just scream right into the side of the Twin Tower, exploding through the other side. And then I witnessed both towers collapse, one first and then the second, mostly due to structural failure because the fire was just too intense.
The myth bled into the FEMA report and was echoed by the experts.
It was the combination of the impact load doing great damage to the building, followed by the fire, that caused collapse.
John Skilling and Les Robertson were the structural engineers who designed the streamlined steel frames of the Twin Towers in the 1960s. Because a wayward Army bomber flew into the Empire State Building in 1945, the towers were built with skyscraper crashes in mind.
The airplane we were envisioning was the largest airplane of its time, flying slowly and low, lost in the fog. We designed the buildings to take the impact of the Boeing 707 hitting the building at any location.
But the aircraft that hit the towers was a Boeing 767, heavier than a 707, fueled for a transcontinental flight and traveling